As we head into the colder months, experts are warning that COVID isn't over. I'm joined by medical microbiologist and infectious diseases specialist, Dr. Donald Vin. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Vin.
Hi, Alicia.
Where is Quebec at right now in terms of COVID infection, and where does it look like we're heading?
So in terms of COVID infections, we're seeing an overall increase. This is seen not only in the wastewater surveillance data, but we're also seeing an increase in hospitalizations associated with COVID. I think this tells us that the amount of COVID activity is increasing. And the concern is that it's not just COVID activity that's increasing. There's also an increase in other respiratory viruses, notably respiratory syncytial virus or RSV. So I think that we're heading into the winter months that we were unfortunately anticipating with other viruses in the mix.
What is the best way forward in the next few months if we expect another wave?
Well, we're going to have to deal with a COVID wave, and that's going to be a wave not just in the community, but of course, the concern is a wave in the hospitals where we're going to have an increase in the number of people requiring hospitalizations for COVID. So the best way to prevent requiring to be hospitalized for COVID is to be at least up to date with your vaccines. So we know that there's a Moderna bivalent booster dose that's available. As of today, there was a Pfizer bivalent booster dose that's available. So if people are due for their booster dose, they should definitely go out and get it. But of course, that's not going to be sufficient because that protects you from, severe or life-threatening disease. But we also want to prevent people from getting, a symptomatic disease that may make them absent from work or school. And the best way to do that is to do basic measures of protection, like masking, especially when indoors, and distancing and ventilation.
How can Quebecers be safe and vigilant amid the Thanksgiving gatherings?
Well, right now it's going to be a tricky event, right? Because the reality is that people want to gather into families, usually an indoor gathering, and in the context of the fact that there is an increase in COVID community transmission. So likely this is going to lead to more and more community transmissions. The reality is you can't change human behavior at this point, but it would be nice if people prepare for the next month or so with getting themselves adequately vaccinated and all the other measures. And by the way, if we're seeing an increase in this other virus that I mentioned before called RSV coming, that's a harbinger that we're also going to likely see an increase in influenza. And in fact, we know that influenza, at least in the Southern Hemisphere, which predates us, was actually one of the worst seasons that they've had in over 5 years. So the other thing that people will need to do is make sure that they're adequately vaccinated against flu so that, over the winter months that tend to be long here in Canada, we're going to be maximally protected.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Vin.
Thank you, Alicia.